The day was hot, and the air in the small southern town shimmered with heat rising from the cracked asphalt. Jerome, a tall black mechanic with strong, grease-stained hands, wiped his brow as he leaned under the hood of a car in the corner of the garage. He'd worked at Miller's auto shop for almost 6 years, fixing everything from rusty pickups to polished sports cars, and had built a reputation for being the man who could repair anything. He wasn't just good, he was the best in the county. But despite his skill, Jerome had learned to keep his head down, to avoid trouble, and to swallow insults when they came. He needed this job to support his family, and in towns like this, men like him didn't always get second chances. That afternoon, as the sun bled into the horizon, the distant roar of a motorcycle echoed down the street. The rumble grew louder until it filled the air, and then a heavy black Harley pulled into the lot. The rider was unmistakable, a leather vest with a skull patch stitched across the back, the unmistakable emblem of the Hells Angels. Heads turned from across the street as the bike rolled to a stop, its pipes rattling against the silence. The man dismounted, a grizzled biker with tattoos winding down his arms and a beard streaked with gray. His name was Mason, though most people in town only referred to him as the Angel. The other mechanics froze, pretending to look busy but keeping their eyes fixed on the outlaw biker. The shop owner, Carl Miller, stepped out of his office, his face tightening. He had no love for bikers, and even less for the idea of his shop being associated with them. But Mason didn't care about Carl's opinion. He strode across the lot, helmet in hand, and pointed to his Harley. "Bike's been acting up, needs fixing, won't ride worth a damn past 60. His voice was gravel, commanding, the kind that didn't expect refusal. Carl shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. "We don't really take in custom work like that," he muttered. "Especially not for..." He stopped himself, but the pause was heavy. Everyone knew what he meant. Jerome, still holding a wrench, glanced at the Harley and instantly recognized the problem. The idle was off, the timing wasn't right, and he could almost hear the sputter in his mind. He knew how to fix it. He also knew what would happen if he spoke up. But Jerome wasn't the kind of man who let someone walk away stranded. He set down his wrench, stepped forward, and said, "I can fix it." Mason turned toward him, sizing him up. "You know Harleys?" Jerome nodded. "Inside and out." Carl's face went red. "Jerome, get back to what you were doing." "I said we're not." But Mason cut him off. "Let him work on it." His tone was final, the kind that left no room for discussion. Reluctantly, Carl backed down, his jaw tight with anger. Jerome wheeled the Harley into the garage, feeling the weight of every stare around him. He could hear whispers, mutters from the other mechanics who didn't like the idea of him touching a Hells Angels bike. But once Jerome's hands touched the machine, the noise faded. It was just him and the Harley now. For hours, he worked with precision, stripping parts, tuning valves, adjusting timing. Grease streaked his arms, sweat ran down his neck, but his focus never wavered. Mason watched from a distance, leaning against the wall, his expression unreadable. When Jerome finally turned the ignition, the bike roared to life with a smoothness that hadn't been there before. The engine purred, steady and strong. Jerome revved it once, the deep growl echoing through the shop, and then let it idle perfectly. Mason's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "That's the sound I've been missing." He slapped Jerome on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stagger slightly. "You got hands of gold, brother. What do I owe you?" Jerome shook his head. "Just doing my job." But before Mason could say more, Carl stormed out of his office. His face was red, his fists clenched. "My office, now." Jerome followed reluctantly, wiping his hands on a rag. The moment the door shut, Carl exploded. "What the hell do you think you're doing? I told you we don't work on bikes like that. You want this shop crawling with outlaw trash? You trying to ruin me?" Jerome held his ground. The man needed help. "I fixed his bike, that's all. Isn't that what we do here, fix things?" Carl's voice dropped low, cold and sharp. "Not for them, and not by you. You don't get to make those decisions. You're done here." Jerome froze. "You're firing me, for fixing a bike, for disobeying me. Pack your things." The words hit harder than a punch. Jerome stood in silence, staring at the man he had worked for faithfully for years. Without another word, he turned and walked out. Mason was waiting by his bike, and when he saw Jerome's face, he knew. "What happened?" Jerome shook his head. "Lost my job." Mason's expression darkened. He swung a leg over his Harley, revved the engine, and said, "You'll hear from me." Then he roared off into the night, the sound of the motorcycle fading into the distance. Dash dash dash. The next morning, the quiet town awoke to a sound that rattled windows and set dogs barking. The thunder of engines filled the streets, a rolling tide of motorcycles flooding into town. Dozens of Hell's Angels rode in, their vests marked with patches, their bikes gleaming in the morning sun. They rolled through Main Street like a storm, and at the front was Mason. The townspeople watched from sidewalks and shop windows, their faces pale. Bikers never came here, not in numbers like this. And when the roaring convoy pulled into Miller's auto shop, it felt like the earth itself shook. Carl burst out of his office, his face twisting in panic. "What the hell is this?" he shouted over the engines. Mason killed his engine and stood, his presence commanding silence from the crowd of riders. He pointed at Jerome, who had shown up only to collect his last paycheck, standing quietly at the edge of the lot. "This man fixed my bike," Mason's voice boomed. "Best mechanic I've seen in 20 years. And you fired him for it?" Carl sputtered, trying to find words. "I run my shop the way I see fit." "I don't." Mason cut him off with a glare. "No, you don't get it. Word's already spread, every man here rides, and every man here trusts his life to his bike. From now on, we don't come to Miller's Auto for a damn thing. We come to Jerome." The crowd of bikers roared their agreement, revving engines in unison. The sound was deafening, a wall of power that shook Carl to his core. Jerome's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Mason stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "I'm talking about your own shop. You've got the skill, you've got the trust of every rider here. You don't need him anymore. We'll make sure of it." Carl shouted, desperate. "You can't just take my business." But Mason turned, his voice calm but final. "Your business fired the only man worth keeping. That's on you." Within weeks, Jerome's life transformed. With the backing of the Hells Angels, he opened his own garage on the edge of town. Word spread fast. If you wanted the best work done on your bike, you went to Jerome. Riders from counties away brought him business, and soon he had more customers than he could handle. Carl's shop, once the busiest in town, fell silent. Cars stopped coming. Bills piled up. Within a year, Miller's auto shop closed its doors. As for Jerome, he stood outside his new garage one evening, watching the sun set over a line of motorcycles parked out front. Mason rode up, his Harley gleaming, and handed Jerome a cold drink. "You earned this," Mason said simply. Jerome smiled, the weight of years finally lifting. "All I did was fix a bike." Mason grinned. "Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything." And as the rumble of engines filled the night, Jerome knew that what had started as a simple act of doing the right thing had rewritten the course of his entire life.